Pay close attention. The news you are about to see is fulfilling Bible prophecy.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you news as it relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yisrael Hawkins. Well, Jeff, we're going to talk about new discovery about an existing planet, an old planet, Jupiter, the largest in our solar system. Apparently, they've discovered 12 more moons orbiting the planet. Valley fever, of course, making a comeback. This airborne disease is affecting a lot of people. And we're going to talk a little bit about the earthquakes that have rocked Turkey and Syria to the core, killing tens of thousands and injuring many more, as well as leaving even more homeless. But first, we're going to take a look at a video as the Pope answered questions from reporters regarding homosexuality and their treatment.
Pope Francis has said that criminalizing homosexuality is a sin as he returned from a two-country trip in Africa. The pontiff was responding to a question from a reporter on his flight out of South Sudan on Sunday.
This is not right. People with homosexual tendencies are children of God.
Figli di Dio. Condannare una persona così.
Condemning a person like that is a sin.
Criminalizzare.
Criminalizing people of homosexual tendencies is an injustice.
Una ingiustizia.
On the flight, the Pope's comments were backed by the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, and the moderator of the Church of Scotland, Ian Greenshields. The two Christian leaders had accompanied Francis to South Sudan in a first for a papal visit.
Well, it seems like, the Pope is really kind of advocating for, I guess, kind of the public to view homosexuals equally. As you remember what we mentioned in the previous broadcast, how he was advocating by saying that homosexuality is a sin, but it's not a crime. So,
right, he's definitely not coming out against it.
No.
Well, 92, that's the new total of moons that orbit Jupiter as astronomers view the celestial bodies through telescopes in Hawaii and Chile. Now, that's a dozen new moons discovered, making the giant planet supreme in comparison to the other planets in total number of moons in our solar system.
Wow. Well, Ukraine's President Zelensky visited and addressed the European Parliament in Brussels and received a standing ovation for his presentation. He hoped to drum up more military support and said that leaving empty-handed was not an option.
He said, quote, "I just don't have the right to go back home without results. It's not cynicism on my part, it's pragmatism. Believe me, there are no emotions anymore. We left emotions a year ago, for there are none of them, just pragmatism."
While there, he also pushed for Ukraine to be admitted to the European Union, and his two-day trip comes while Russia is increasing its bombardment in eastern Ukraine.
Well, in North Korea, Kim Jung UN has been proudly displaying his country's newest nuclear-capable nuclear missiles in an overnight parade in Pyongyang. Now, about a dozen ICBMs rolled through the streets, cheered by thousands of troops.
Kim's young daughter stood and clapped by his side, and of course there's been some talk and speculation that she might be his eventual successor.
And I think at one time they were actually thinking that Kim might pick his sister.
That's right.
As the successor, but now I guess it's switching to the daughter. Well, the Pentagon has confirmed the shooting down of an unidentified object on the orders of President Biden. The object was detected the night before, floating 40,000 feet above the Alaskan coast, heading in a northeasterly direction, well within the range of commercial airliners.
John Kirby spoke at a press briefing and said, quote, "It posed a reasonable threat to the safety of civilian flight, and it came inside our territorial airspace and over territorial water, end quote. Well, the Pentagon said that the object was shot down quickly because it was over frozen waters, making the recovery easier, and because its size would create less of a debris field.
Kirby also said of this latest object that it was much smaller than the last object, being only about the size of a small car as opposed to several buses. Now, the object reached U.S. airspace less than a week after the U.S. military shot down a Chinese spy balloon, which also entered in over Alaska, making its way over several states in 7 days.
Of course, a lot of lawmakers were a little bit frustrated at the fact that it took so long to do anything about that first one because it had been over U.S. airspace for 7 days.
Right, really going from the northwest corner of the United States all the way over to the eastern coastline before it was shot down.
That's right. Well, the U.S. announced that it has added Chinese firms that are connected to Beijing's surveillance balloon program to an export blacklist so they can't access U.S. technology or goods. Well, so far, the White House said that they have not reached out to China about this new object that was shot down.
Well, we're now going to turn to our field correspondent, Larry McGee, who has been covering several stories for us, including the devastating Turkey-Syria earthquake. Has killed many people, destroyed many buildings there, as many as 5,000 buildings lost in that earthquake. But first, he has a story for us on valley fever. Larry, what do you have for us?
Among the many other troubles raging across the globe today, there is still the ever-present concern of disease, the latest of which is valley fever, an old foe which has reemerged, is spreading rapidly, and is being likened to COVID in its symptoms. The affliction is currently impacting America's Southwest, but in so much as it is airborne, there are great fears that it might also make its way into other parts of the country. The country of Turkey is struggling to find a way to cope with and rebound from what's been referred to as the worst earthquake in a century that struck the nation in its pre-dawn hours as many of its citizens slept. The massive quake, which caused structures around the region to fall, is reported to have lasted for around a minute and a half. The exact number of those trapped underneath the rubble at this point is unknown. To further compound the tragedy, the country is also having to contend with powerful after effects. Researchers are having to work through 6-point aftershocks in their efforts to unearth and extricate survivors. President Erdogan says the seismic event, which registered at 7.7, is the worst that his nation has experienced since 1939, with rain, sleet, snow, and below zero temperatures approaching. The next 48 hours are said to be critical for those who might still be alive and hanging on underneath the carnage. Have a look at this video that shows drone footage of the destruction. YPN News. I'm Larry McGee. Katan Jeff, back to you.
Katan, you see in the video there the before and after pictures. Of course, you see the comparison there in these earthquakes, a super strong earthquake there in Syria. People are suffering greatly, a lot of destruction, and the weather there is not helping the situation.
Very cold, very difficult. And the rescuers are also concerned at the same time, not knowing if there are going to be continual aftershocks, putting other people at risk while they're trying to rescue, worried about more debris falling down and injuring or potentially killing more people. Well, it's being called the most powerful earthquake of the century. In the immediate aftermath, 1,600 had perished in Turkey and Syria. But because it was early in the morning when the quake took place, those numbers are expected to rise dramatically.
Well, the Turkish president, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, addressed his country and the world saying, Quote, "We do not know how far the number of dead and injured will rise as debris removal works continue on many buildings in the quake zone. Our hope is that we will recover from this disaster with the least loss of life."
Even though the temperatures are extremely cold, rescuers are working feverishly to find anyone who might have survived and recover those who did not. But making it even more difficult is the strong aftershock still taking place across the area. While the earthquake was 7.8 in magnitude, the aftershocks preceding just 2 hours later was 7.5. Well, but stronger. Both were stronger than the quake back in 1939, which was a 7.4 and killed 17,000 people and also left 500,000 people without homes.
Well, CNN received a clip from a reporter during the aftershock, which shows the severity of the situation. Now, the reporter says, quote, "As we were heading to the rubble to film search and rescue efforts, there were 2 consecutive aftershocks with a loud noise, and the building you are seeing on my left was brought down to earth. There's lots of dust. This local resident here covered in dust."
Well, this has been the deadliest earthquake in more than a decade. After 5 days, the devastation there has brought over 140,000 rescue workers on the ground in Turkey. But in Syria, it is a very different scenario. There are very few aid workers there, and those who are begging for assistance.
Well, CBS News traveled to Adıyaman in southeastern Turkey, where multiple buildings, including apartment complexes, have completely collapsed. Now, the people left are living among the rubble, no shelter or clean water to drink, and surrounded by death and destruction.
Reporters call it apocalyptic looking. One woman they encountered is looking for her 52-year-old sister. Already, she has buried her mother and father in the aftermath of the earthquake. She has no real hope that her sister will be found alive. She says, quote, "Maybe if they had started digging 1 or 2 days earlier, but there was no help. Victims must help themselves, and successful rescues still happen."
But the prevailing environment right now, according to this woman, is the sorrow and the cold. "Look at us," she says. "I don't have any shoes. I don't have any water to wash my hands. We have nothing. There are more dead people here than alive. This city is a cemetery." You know, Katan, our hearts go out to these people in Turkey and Syria in this devastating earthquake. Death toll at 1,600, but we know, as with many times in these situations, that's going to climb tremendously when they start the recovery process and realize how many people are actually missing. This quake hitting somewhere around 4:30 in the morning. Many people were sleeping at that time, and as we've mentioned, bringing down close to 5,000 buildings. So you can bet that death toll is going to go up, and it might even surpass their big earthquake that they had in 1939, when we said 17,000 people perished.
Yeah, and looking at the videos, we can look at and see that these buildings, they're not just single-family homes. They're multi-family buildings which occupy many, many families. So as you said, those numbers will definitely increase. But we're also seeing an increase in the kind of old diseases with that valley fever that's coming back. And so it's got a lot of people up on edge. Either they're getting it from the air or they're getting it from the earth.
Right. Well, if you'd like to learn more about these stories, contact the House of Yahweh. And when you do, don't forget to request your free copy of the monthly newsletter and Prophetic Word magazine. Here's how.
You can contact the House of Yahweh by writing them at the House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can call them at 1-800-613-9494. You can also visit them on the web by going to Yahweh.com, YisraelHawkins.com, or Yahweh'sBranch.com. You can also visit our website by going to YPNnews.com. You can also email the House of Yahweh at info@yahweh.com. And don't forget the international calls. You can call the number on your screen. And stay tuned, as YisraelSays.com is under construction with some new updates to provide you an even better experience.
Well, don't go anywhere. Up next is another classic message from Yisrael Hawkins. From all of us here at YPN News, I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
And I'm Katan Alexander.
Thanks for watching.